Seriously, what the HE double hockey sticks, Disney? Alright everyone, a photo reviews here, hoping you decide, is that book worth reading of a second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So let's decide. Also, if you hear a little bell tinkling and the sound of snorting, that is the puppy I've gotten. She is currently curled up under the desk sleeping, or not sleeping, but staring at me. But if you hear that, that's what that is. Today's book is the infamous Heir to the Empire. Well, infamous, but Heir to the Empire, written by Timothy Zahn. I believe it's Timothy A. Zahn, but it's not in this title, so I'm not sure. And it was published on May 1st of 1991, which makes it older than me. This is the first of the eponymous Thrawn trilogy, introducing the canon immigrant Thrawn himself. Now, I would try to show you my nerd credit and tell you you can use his actual Chiss name, which is the name of his species, his actual Chiss name, but yeah, I don't know how to say that. Anyways, the trilogy actually has a fair amount of interesting trivia. For example, not only is it the introduction, the debut novel which introduced Thrawn, the long-standing character that he is, it introduced the fan-favorite EU character Mara Jade, along with the creation of the Chiss species, which has obviously made its way into the main canon, and was actually the first book to refer to the Imperial Center, or as Coruscant, a name that George Lucas liked so much that he adopted it for the prequel trilogy. At least that's what I read online. If that's wrong, feel free to correct me, but, I mean, it was interesting trivia for this section, so I thought, why not? There are other small references here and there that show up in the prequel trilogy to things that are mentioned in this, but I don't really think they're worth mentioning right here, so to move on, here's the ratings. And now, on to the cover. Now, the cover for The Heir to the Empire is this one. This is the one I have. But it's one of those older books that has so many different covers that it would be hard to go through them all. Now, obviously, I got the Post Legends cover, and it's kind of hard to necessarily talk about this one by itself because I've seen the covers to its sequel, and it's actually a dual cover. You put them together and it forms one big picture. So technically what I'd be reviewing here is one half of a picture. Even then, I would still argue that it's pretty good. You got Luke Skywalker standing in the forefront, lightsaber drawn, titular black glove as a sort of smoke rises behind him. And then you have the shadowed face, the shadowed left half of Thrawn's face behind him, staring with the glowing menace that he promises to bring. You can tell right away he's not human. And you can tell right away that he's got Luke on edge. In addition to the fact that it's not a picture, but rather a drawing, it's very nice. I like this cover. I also like what the cover's made of. It's kind of like that faux vellum kind of thing, and it feels real nice to rub against. It's one of my favorite kind of covers. We'll slide right on to the synopsis. I'll go more in depth on the covers when I review the second one, if I get the second one with the... Now, for longtime viewers of this channel, you know that I read the back of the book on my TBR to give you a basic idea of what the book considers a good synopsis. However, for the sake of the review, for the sake of context, I still go into it. However, if you still like to check out the TBR and, give me views, feel free. I'm not going to tell you now. But, to move on, this book takes place about 5 years after the Empire has fallen. Or, more specifically, 5 years after the Emperor was defeated and Darth Vader returned to the light side, and then died. Now, in that time, the rebellion has reclaimed much of the Empire-held lands and is trying to form their own republic, their own government. However, the Imperial remnants will still control a substantial part of the galaxy, even though they've been reduced about a quarter of their size, have recently come under the command of a master Grand Admiral strategist known as Thrawn, who seems to be leading them in victories against the Republic that has most of the New Republic worried. We get split focuses between Luke, Leia, like our original trilogy cast, and then Thrawn himself and the Imperial Remnants. It'll be easier if I start with Thrawn's. Thrawn, we basically see a lot of vagueness from Thrawn. They try to keep his main plan under wraps, so it's still surprising in the final battle. but we do still see a lot of what he's planning. For example, we see him planning this attack on a shipyard to take what we assume is to take it over. But we also see him seeking out the Emperor's personal storerooms to find technology that the Emperor hid from the world at large so he could hold the advantage. During this time, he runs into a dark Jedi. That's something I gotta get into. A dark Jedi known as Sabaoth, who wants Luke and Leia to come under... who he convinces to work with him in exchange for kidnapping Luke, Leia, and Leia's soon-to-be twins so he can train them under his own Jedi Order. Now, Luke's plotline deals with him investigating the Sabaoth, effectively, before crash landing on a planet and being held prisoner by a group of smugglers working with Thrawn, who haven't decided if they're going to turn him over, as well as dealing with the mysterious Mara Jade, who seems to have a chip on her shoulder about Luke for some reason. And then we follow Han, Leia, and Chewbacca as they try to avoid being kidnapped, Leia being kidnapped by Thrawn's forces, a alien race known as the I'm not going to try to pretend to say it because I already forgot how it's spelled. But while they try to kidnap her and deliver her and her still in the womb twins to Sabaoth for the price. That's pretty much it in terms of that regards. I can't go too deep into it. Leia's mostly running while Han and Lando are trying to figure out what's going on. But that's about it. We see the entire original cast come back, and it's glorious. But before I get too into this, let's slip more naturally into the review section. Honestly, truth be told, reading this book made me mad. The more I read, the more frustrated I became with each page, with each chapter. The more I just thought to myself and felt myself getting more and more annoyed. And the thought is, what the hell, Disney? You have this book, this 30-plus-year-old story with characters that were introduced and became fan-favorite characters in both Mara Jade and Grand Admiral Thrawn. You have a story that honors what came before, that has every character act to their fullest potential from where we left them off on Return of the Jedi. We have things like Luke's bionic hand, which is never brought up after he gets it, actually making an impact on the story. We get to see Chewbacca's home. We get to see his culture. We get to see who Chewbacca is as a person with more nuance than we've ever seen. We get to see Han and Lando working together as they try to figure out what's going on, seeing that chemistry the two of them have as good friends that made us understand why Han would go to Lando in the Empire Strikes Back. It's just, you had all this amazing groundwork already laid for you in this book, and you made that? What? Honestly, folks, I hope that helps emphasize how much I enjoyed this book, because I don't know how I could stress it anymore. This was a good book. This wasn't just a good book in terms of reading, but it was like a perfect sequel to the original trilogy. I know I've liked almost all the books that I've read this month, with even Rogue Planet eking out more on the positive side of meh than the negative side. But I can honestly say, without a doubt, this was my favorite of the entire month. I was so afraid that I'd heard so much hype about this book, that it had been built up so much that when I finally read it, I was going to be like, wow, that wasn't as good as everyone thought. But no, it really does live up to the hype. It really is good enough for all that praise that it gets. I honestly don't even want to go deeper than that because I don't want to spoil it. I want you to go read this book spoiler free. So if this book interests you, if you've heard the tales, if you haven't read this and you have been thinking about it, click off now and go read it before you finish this review. I recommend it. You will thank me for going in blind. This is an amazing book. It even avoids the things that I was worried about. So I've read two of Zahn's previous books. One I reviewed on this channel named Allegiance. And while I liked it, it had its issues that I brought up in that review. It's one of my older ones, but if you're interested in me going into it, go and check it out on my channel. However, the other one that I haven't talked about on this channel that was more relevant to what I'm considering, Outbound Flight. Now, I mentioned reading this in the X-Wing review, But Outbound Flight was a book that I read and I really enjoyed for the most part. However, I had issues with it. One such thing was that the legacy characters felt forced in. Anakin and Obi-Wan make an appearance, but they only seemed to be there because like they were contractually obligated to be there almost. They didn't feel natural that they were in the story, and they don't make an impact in any significant way. But the second is, one of the things that bothered me the most in that book was Thrawn came off so much like a Mary Sue that I was worried that I was going to get into this and Thrawn was going to be a villain Sue, which is basically a Mary Sue but a villain. And I say that because in Outbound Flight, although Thrawn is relatively understandable for most of it with most of his battle planning and stuff, there's this one scene where he somehow not only accurately predicts how someone is going to react to being told they're going to be in prison, not only accurately predicts what vessel they're going to steal when they flee, not only accurately predicts where they're going to go immediately after, which is to a group of slavers that his people are fighting, not only accurately predicts that he's going to not only convince these slavers to come attack him, but give them perfect battle plans to help destroy his people, and they're not going to just blow him out of the sky without listening. Not only accurately predicts that these people are going to take a specific route in to attack them, to where they accidentally fall into this gravity well trap, and then not only accurately predicts what the immediate response of every force involved in this battle is going to be, but it's just one of those, it was just so hard to buy. He was able to predict all that he came off like a Mary Sue. And that was just one book. For the most part, it was really good. However, because of that, I was worried going into this book he was going to be a villain Sue. And I'm not really a fan of that. I honestly think it's at its worst when you're in those detective stories. Like, Castle did it fairly well, but I'm talking things... You know what I'm talking about, though. Those cop shows where they have to deal with a serial killer, but somehow the serial killer is always one step ahead of them, even to the point that it stretches reality. Like, how the hell did the serial killer know they were going to take this exact route, make this exact decision, and do this exact thing? It doesn't make sense. They come off as so perfectly planned that it annoys me. So, obviously avoided that trap. I kind of ranted about something unrelated for a moment, but all in all, it's good. It avoids that. It's great. In this case, it channels more the Allegiance writing than the Outbound Flight writing. In that, you completely understand how he makes these leaps of logic. You understand how he gets into position. You can buy he's setting all these strategies and figuring things out, and you can see how his plan would work. And it also takes everyone else, and it throws wrenches in the work, things that Thrawn couldn't possibly predict. Like, he can set all the traps he wants for Luke Skywalker, but unless he knows how to counteract Luke's force powers and his natural piloting skill, his ambushes don't work. He can set all these traps to capture Leia and Han and Luke, but he can't predict that they have natural instincts that keep them from getting caught. He can set all these traps up, and he can completely misunderstand a situation. He can think someone is doing one thing, but then acknowledges that he had the wrong lay of the land, or that person predicts something else, and thinks, oh, this person's doing this, so I'll do this to throw them off. Versus the Outbound Flight writing, which is, this guy seems like this and this and this, so he's going to do this. Aha, but I knew he was going to figure me out for doing this and this and this, and I knew he was going to do that, so instead I'm going to do this. Oh, but wait a minute, if he's smart enough, he knows I'm going to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, and stop him there.
Because I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew that I knew you would cheat.
But seriously, Disney missed out on a chance to have Leia Organa Solo, I think that's how you... Leia Organa, or Leia Skywalker? Disney missed out on a chance to have Princess Leia use a lightsaber to take down an entire ship of assassins while swinging through the trees of Kashyyyk. That's what you missed out on, because they chose to make their version. Truth be told, the only real complaint I have about this book is Leia feels slightly off a majority of it. She doesn't really feel like her normal snarky self that you would see, but that's easily chalked up to the fact that she's pregnant with twins and is being constantly attacked with the clear intent to kidnap her for unknown reasons, so I was able to kind of brush that off, and her snark does return later on. So I'll just move on to something else. Now, last review I mentioned that there was something I was going to bring up that I didn't want to get into there. And that was how interesting it is to read books that were written before the prequel trilogies or before certain things were canonized and see where the mindset was. Now, for the X-Wing specifically, it was about Nawara's Leku, his head tails. In X-Wing, they're only exclusively listed as brain tails. That's all they're ever called. And it's clear that Stackpole was under the assumption that Twi'leks have a much more prehensile brain tail, as he put it, because at several times Nawara has it moving of its own accord, even tickling someone under the chin at one point. So that was interesting. But in this specific case, one thing was that I actually looked up to confirm was Sith. The term Sith wasn't actually officially canonized till the first movie, till Phantom Menace. So anytime they're referring to a dark side user, they call them Dark Jedi in this, which was really interesting in my mind. I thought that was pretty weird. I figured they would have re-edited it by now to do that, but they didn't. You also see a couple hints of what they used to think Clone Wars was about. For example, in this, Sabath is referred to as a clone, despite the fact that an Outbound Flight, which admittedly was written like 14 years after this, Sabath went missing well before the Clone Wars ever started. So there is that interesting prospect when you get into really old EU novels like this, and you see where the mindscapes of the fan were when they were writing their extended universe. Because, obviously you didn't have the Clone Wars or the Phantom Menace or the Return of the Sith or the Revenge of the Sith out yet. So, yeah, it was just really interesting. Well, I got nothing else to stretch this review out, so 9 out of 10. I honestly cannot recommend this book enough for anyone who has any interest in Star Wars or even the EU or Legends or just anything like that. Even if you just have a general interest in sci-fi and you have a basic idea of how the Star Wars story goes, pick it up. You will much more appreciate this if you are a fan of Star Wars, but I think you're perfectly capable of reading this and enjoying it even if you aren't a fan. Now, obviously, I can't speak for sure, not being a fan, but I would put money on it. So, if you have any interest in Star Wars, if you have any interest in sci-fi, just go check this out. I really recommend it. In fact, I liked it so much, I'm not even going to pretend it's an option to throw it in Mount Doom. This does not deserve it. This doesn't even deserve to come near it. Honestly, it was the best book to end Star Wars month on. With that being said, it's time to look forward to the future. Time to head to next month. I'll see you next month, where we're going to have a gay old time on this channel.